What's going on, guys? Bears with Knives here, and today I'm back again with another knife review, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Buck 110 Slim Pro. Now, this is a very interesting knife from Buck Knives, and I'm going to be talking about it today. So, first thing I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you a quick shot of the knife, front and back right here. Put that off to the side for the moment. Here's the packaging. It comes in pretty standard Buck box right here, nothing too special about it. Next thing, I'm going to give you a couple size comparisons. This is actually a pretty large knife in size. So here it is next to the Ontario Wrap Model 2. Right there. Next one is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 with the Tonto blade. And hopefully you can see that the Buck 110 Slim Pro here is actually longer than the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. Next one is a Benchmade Bug Out. Right there. And last but not least, a Hinderer XM Slippy. Right there. So there's your size comparisons. Now let's talk stats. So I purchased this knife off of BladeHQ.com, which is where you can as well. I am no way sponsored or endorsed by BladeHQ. I just like them as a retailer, and I tend to buy most of my knives from them. So I pulled these stats I'm about to list off their website, and if they're wrong in any way, don't blame me, blame them. So the first thing is the overall length on this knife is 8.625 inches overall length. Your blade length is 3.75 inches. Your handle length is 4.875 inches. And your weight is 2.8 ounces. So there we go. There's the stats. Now let's talk price. The price on this particular knife is $90, $89.99 on Blade HQ's website, which is an awesome price in my personal opinion. And there's a couple different versions of this knife. This one has the brown OD green micarta handles, whichever one you want to call it. They also offer a brown and a black handle for this knife as well. So a couple different color options if the green isn't your style. So there we go. Now let's talk about this knife here. And the first thing I will say is these micarta scales are very, very nice. I love these micarta scales. Micarta is probably my favorite handle material, just in general, and these are very well done. I like them a lot. Micarta is a great material. It's very comfortable in hand, and these scales are just done really, really well. So there we go. Next thing up here is the pocket clip. You got a tip up right hand and I believe left hand carry pocket clip. I'm pretty sure you can swap this over to the other side as well, but it's a tip up carry pocket clip. Works well. Goes in and out of the pocket fine. I haven't had any problems with it. It's got just enough spring to it, and it works, keeps the knife in your pocket, which is what it's meant to do. So there we go. Now the opening on this knife is thumb studs. You have dual thumb studs right here on either side. The thumb studs stick up a decent amount from the frame, so they're easy to get to and use, which is nice. And they're pretty comfortable, they're not sharp in any way, and allows you to very easily pop that blade out. And here's the blade. It's a very, very large blade right here. A nice clip point blade as well, which I love. You see the Buck logo up there and the USA made. And this blade is made of S30V steel. And S30V is a great steel. It has good edge retention. And especially for the price at under $100 at $90 to get S30V is pretty awesome. So I'm a big fan of that. And this knife is a lockback here. So you have the knife open, you just depress the lockback to close it. There we go. And the action is smooth on the opening of the knife and the closing with the lockback. The lockback isn't too hard to depress. It's just right. And the knife closes very well. So, one thing I want to touch on is that this is USA made, which, you know, being from the United States, that's always something I like to see and something I appreciate to have a good, nice tool made here in America. So, USA made, always a great thing. Next thing is the fit and finish on this knife is pretty good. The micarta handles, as I was talking about, they're very well done. They're not sharp anywhere. All the edges are nicely rounded. And you can see here on the back spacer that the fitting is pretty good. You know, there's slight gaps up here towards the top, but I would say in general the back spacer fitting is pretty decent. You'll see this on budget knives and expensive knives. Getting a backspacer perfectly flush is pretty difficult to do, but for what this has, I would say that that's a pretty well fit backspacer. As well as the blade has no blade play, it's rock solid in there, as you would expect. And this knife came centered as well, or just about centered. It might be a touch off, but it's to the point where I don't really care. It's good enough for me. So there we go. Next thing is the carry of this knife. This knife carries very well for how large it is. As I said, overall length is 8.625 inches overall, so this is a pretty large knife. But it carries very well. The pocket clip, as I said, is very functional, goes in and out of the pocket fine, and it's a relatively thin knife for what it is. I'll compare it next to a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 here. You could see that the buck is quite a bit thinner than your Paramilitary 2 here. So it's fairly thin for the size and also very lightweight as well. Like I said, this knife is 2.8 ounces, under 3 ounces for a very large knife, and that's really good. So you can easily slide this knife in your pocket. It's thin, it doesn't get in the way of anything, it just hangs out in the corner of your pocket, and you get a lot of blade and a lot of capability for a very small amount of weight, which is always something that is a risk. A lot of times if you get a bigger knife, you're going to have more weight. But with this, they did a really good job of balancing the size and the weight, and it's perfect in the pocket, and it carries like a dream. So that's really good. Next thing is the ergonomics on this knife. This knife has a pretty simple handle. There's no fancy finger choils or nothing going on here, but you do have this nice curvature to the handle here, and it's very comfortable in hand. And you have plenty of handle to work with here. I don't have the largest hands, but it fits me just fine, and it fits well in the hand. But if you got giant, massive hands, this knife is still going to fit you as well. I think you would be hard-pressed to find somebody that their hands can't fit on this knife. But it's very comfortable in hand, easy to use. That's good. So, next thing is that this knife is just a fantastic tool. That seems like something I shouldn't have to say when it comes to a pocket knife, but I feel like knives being tools can get lost in this modern knife era. A lot of knives these days, they tend to have a lot of frills, and they try to be fancy with, Timascus handle scales and, Van Ack super clean blades and all that stuff. This is a very simple tool. You're talking micarta handles, a lockback, and an S30V clip point blade made in the USA. But it's good, it's functional. You got a lot of blade to work with here of S30V, so you got plenty of blade length for whatever you're cutting, which is great. And it just works. It's reliable, it's strong. You got that lockback on there. It's easy to carry. It just works, and that is something I greatly appreciate with this knife, is that it's not fancy, it's simplistic, but goddamn does it do the job you want it to do. You just throw this in your pocket, and you can go to town on this thing, and you're most likely not going to hurt it. And guess what? If you do, Buck has a pretty good warranty. So if you have an issue with the knife, you can go ahead and send it back. So this is just a tank of a knife. It's a good workhorse, and it's just a good tool that will do whatever you need it to do. So that's probably my favorite thing about this knife, is that it's just a good tool. So there we go. Now let's talk things I don't like about this knife. The first thing is the pocket clip. The pocket clip, like I said, it works, it's functionally fine. Just for me personally, I find the pocket clip to be quite obtrusive. It's very big when it's sticking out of your pocket. It's very large, and it's just, I don't know, it just annoys me a little bit. That's definitely more of a nitpick or more of a personal preference thing than anything, but just for me, that pocket clip is a little too obnoxious for my personal taste. Next thing with the pocket clip is it does create a little bit of a hot spot in the hand. If you're really cranking down on this knife trying to do some hard cutting, you definitely can feel that pocket clip digging into the palm of your hand. If you're just cutting through cardboard or anything like that, you don't feel it too much, but if you're really doing some hard cutting, if you're carving into wood or anything like that, you definitely can feel that pocket clip in the palm of your hand. So you do get a little bit of a hot spot off the back of the clip. Next thing is I would like to see a sharpening choil on this knife. As you can see here, there's no sharpening choil on this particular knife, and I feel like this knife needs one given how long the blade is. A sharpening choil would just make this a little easier to sharpen on a flat stone or on a sharpening system, and hopefully you can see that there's already a slight recurve starting to form in the blade right here, and a sharpening choil would help prevent that from increasing, because when you don't have a sharpening choil, the more you sharpen this over time, the more that recurve is going to develop. And of course you can still sharpen a recurve on a flat stone or on a sharpening system. It just takes a little more finesse and frankly a little more skill to sharpen a recurve on a sharpening stone. So I would just like to see a sharpening choil in here. You can add one in with a file or a Dremel if you want to, but I would just prefer if it would come with a sharpening choil from the factory. And last thing is that there's no disassembly on this knife. You cannot take this knife apart. As you can see, everything is pinned together, which is fine, but I would like to see some actual hardware on here so you can take this knife apart. Like I said, out of the box, no blade play, it's rock solid, but as you use this knife, especially if you're going to be beating on this knife and doing a lot of hard work with it, you're most likely going to get some blade play in there eventually. So it kind of bums me out a little bit that you don't have the capability to tighten the pivot or anything like that if that happens. Like I said earlier, Buck does have a pretty good warranty, so I'm sure if you have any problems with it, you can send it back, and they'll either try to fix it or give you a new one, something like that. But I would just like to see the ability to adjust the pivot and disassemble the knife. So that's really everything I don't like about this knife. The pocket clip, for me personally, is a little obnoxious. It creates a little bit of a hot spot in the hand if you're really doing hard use cutting with this. Needs a sharpening choil. It would just make sharpening for this knife a little nicer, and there's no disassembly, so if your pivot ever loosens up, you do not have the ability to tighten it. So there we go. Now what are my final thoughts on this knife? My final thoughts on this knife is that this is a great tool. This is very much a knife that I can recommend to somebody who's not really a knife person or who I know is just going to be beating the crap out of their knives, because this thing is going to be able to take it. It's strong, it's solid, it's got that lock back, it's got S30V steel, it's just going to work. This is a very good knife for someone that just wants a tool that they can take to work and beat the crap out of it every day and not have to worry about it. And like I said, for the size, it being such a large knife, it carries very well for how thin it is and how light it is. And it really is nice to carry and use, and it's just a good worker. This knife will just do whatever you need it to do. It's USA made, and let me just talk about the price on this knife. Like I said, the price is $90. For what you're getting here, this is a very large knife with great micarta handles and quite a big piece of S30V steel. For under $100, USA made, that's a steal. That is an absolute steal in my personal opinion. So the price on this knife is fantastic. It's under $100, and I really think this opens this knife up to a large audience of people that are looking for a good, reliable knife without having to spend $200 for something like this Paramilitary 2 Tonto right here. So it's just very good, and this is definitely a knife I can recommend to people that just want a good tool. They're not worried about it being fancy or anything like that. You can save up $90, buy one of these, and this knife is going to last you a very, very long time. So there we go. That's my review of the Buck Knives 110 Slim Pro. Honestly, a really good knife. I like this knife quite a bit, and I can definitely recommend it. So there we go. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.